Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because our mission is to take a look at the true scale of modern nuclear weapons. And I know, when you hear nuclear bomb, you probably
Here's all
picture.
grainy black and white footage, right?
Yeah, exactly. The classic desert test site, you see the flash, the iconic mushroom cloud rising up.
Maybe some test houses getting blown away by a shockwave.
Right. It feels very historical, like a closed chapter in a history book. But the reality that's sitting in quiet silos right now, today, it makes that vintage footage look like, well, like a firecracker.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't merely a discussion about military hardware. It's really an exploration of how humanity engineered tools of virtually infinite power.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is. And perhaps more importantly, the terrifying, totally counterintuitive logic of why we designed and built them with the ultimate theoretical goal that they must never, ever be used.
Right, the paradox. But to even begin to wrap our heads around the mind-bending scale of the modern arsenal, I mean, we really have to establish a baseline.
We do. We need to know what a quote-unquote small nuclear weapon looks like.
Yeah, because without that, the modern yields just sound like abstract math. So let's look back at 1945. The United States dropped the little boy bomb on Hiroshima.
Right.
In the context of nuclear weapons, that was a 15-kiloton detonation. And I want you to just keep that number in your head for this entire conversation. 15 kilotons.
And we really have to be clear-eyed about the mechanics of what those 15 kilotons actually did to a densely populated area.
Yeah, the toll was just apocalyptic.
It truly was. That single detonation killed 80,000 people instantly. And then within a year, as the immediate aftereffects took hold, the death toll rose to 140,000.
It's hard to even fathom those numbers.
I know. 13 square kilometers of the city were virtually erased from the map in a flash. 90% of Hiroshima's buildings were utterly destroyed or severely damaged.
And the destruction didn't even end with the blast pressure. I mean, the intense heat incinerated plant life and completely altered the local weather patterns.
Right, the black rain.
Yes. Triggering what became known as black rain, which was this toxic radioactive downpour that poisoned the water table and basically ruined the ecosystem for decades.
And survivors face long-term consequences from leukemia to, severe genetic impacts.
And that historic tragedy, which literally changed global warfare forever, that was just 15 kilotons.
Just 15.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Fast forward a mere 16 years to 1961. The Soviet Union tests its weapon on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago called the Tsar Bomba, the king of bombs.
Yeah, the big one.
If Hiroshima was 15 kilotons, the Tsar Bomba was 50 megatons.
And just converting that so we're on the same scale, 50 megatons is 50,000 kilotons.
Wow.
So the Tsar Bomba was the equivalent of over 3,300 Hiroshima bombs detonating at the exact same geographic coordinate at the exact same moment.
That's just incomprehensible.
The sheer physical scale of the explosion defies natural terrestrial events. Like if you overlay a picture of the Tsar Bomba's mushroom cloud next to Hiroshima's, you would essentially need a magnifying glass to locate the Hiroshima cloud.
Because the atmospheric data from this test is just staggering. The mushroom cloud punched straight up through the atmosphere, reaching 64 kilometers into the sky.
Well into the stratosphere.
Yeah. And the visible flash from the detonation, it was seen 1,000 kilometers away in Norway.
Which is insane. And if you were standing 100 kilometers away from ground zero, the thermal radiation was still intense enough to cause instantaneous third-degree burns.
Oh, my God.
And the atmospheric shock wave from the blast was so powerful, it physically circled the entire Earth 3 times before dissipating.
3 times, a man-made explosion. And wait, what makes that event even more sobering is looking at the original engineering schematics.
Yes.
Because Soviet scientists originally designed the Tsar Bomba to yield 100 megatons, right?
They did. But they have the yield to 50 megatons right before the test.
Why?
Because they were legitimately terrified that a 100-megaton blast would physically crack the Earth's crust or violently shift the planet's axis.
That is, just think about this. They achieved this apocalyptic earth-cracking power in 1961, an era of slide rules, decades before the internet or mobile phones even existed.
And rotary phones, yeah.
Right. If a vintage 1961 quote-unquote calculator could almost shift the planet's axis, what are we sitting on today?
Exactly. And they even altered the detonation parameters for the Tsar Bomba, setting it off as an airburst 4 kilometers in the sky.
Just to limit the damage.
Right. By doing that, the energy radiated out in a 360-degree sphere, rather than punching 180 degrees straight down into the ground, which avoided deep Earth structural damage and minimized local fallout.
Humanity held the power to potentially alter the planetary axis, and a small group of scientists had to consciously choose to dial it back.
Yeah, they had to step back from the brink.
But logic dictates we would stay back from the brink, but we didn't. Instead, we miniaturized that apocalypse to make it highly deliverable.
We made it efficient.
Right. So, to understand how humanity leaped from a 15-kiloton bomb to a 50-megaton Leviathan in just 16 years, we have to look at how the underlying physics fundamentally shifted. Because it's a huge misconception, the difference between an atomic bomb and a nuclear or hydrogen bomb.
Yeah, they didn't just scale up the explosive material. The shift from early atomic weapons to modern thermonuclear weapons involved moving from a single-stage fission process to a multi-stage fusion process.
So early weapons like Little Boy relied on fission.
Right, splitting heavy, unstable atoms like uranium-235 or plutonium-239.
But a modern thermonuclear weapon relies on forcing light atoms of hydrogen to fuse together, which is fusion.
Exactly. Unlocking fusion requires environments of unimaginable heat and pressure, essentially the conditions found at the core of the sun.
But how do you engineer a microsun inside a metal casing falling through the sky? Like mechanically?
Well, that is where the Teller-Ulam design comes in. It's the foundational architecture of modern thermonuclear weapons. To achieve fusion, you actually place a standard A-bomb, a fission bomb, inside the casing to act as a trigger.
Wait, so the A-bomb is just the spark plug?
Precisely. But it's not just a big explosion setting off another explosion. When the primary fission stage detonates, it releases a massive flood of X-ray radiation.
Oh, and because X-rays are electromagnetic radiation, they travel at the speed of light.
Which means they outpace the physical shockwave of the trigger explosion itself.
Wow.
Yeah. Those X-rays flood the inside of the bomb casing and reflect off the interior walls, compressing the secondary fusion fuel, the deuterium and tritium, with unimaginable force and heat.
And that starts the fusion.
Right, this radiation implosion initiates the fusion reaction mere microseconds before the physical blast wave from the primary trigger can catch up and blow the entire weapon apart.
It's a marvel of timing in physics that unlocks virtually limitless energy yields.
Limitless energy.
And when you unlock limitless energy, the explosion itself isn't even the final threat. The strategic models point to the mechanism of nuclear winter.
Oh yeah, that's the real existential threat.
Because a large-scale exchange of these fusion weapons wouldn't just destroy cities. The massive firestorms would draw millions of tons of soot and ash deep into the stratosphere.
Above the cloud line, where rain cannot wash it out.
Exactly.
That stratospheric layer of soot acts as a reflective barrier, significantly increasing the Earth's albedo. So it reflects incoming solar radiation back into space, effectively blocking the sun.
Which means global temperatures would plummet by up to 30 degrees in a matter of weeks. We are talking about a sudden, drastic, decade-long winter.
Photosynthesis grinds to a halt.
And the global agricultural systems that feed billions of people collapse entirely. It translates to total ecosystem failure and mass starvation.
The creation of this mechanism weighed heavily on the individuals who first unraveled the math, as you can imagine.
Oh, the human element of this is wild. The evolution of nuclear physics is deeply intertwined with profound moral friction. Like, look at Albert Einstein.
Right.
He helped the U.S. initiate their nuclear program out of a theoretical motive. He believed that if this technology existed, its sheer destructive potential would terrify world leaders into an enforced peace.
Assuming they'd never actually use it.
Exactly. But when the theoretical deterrent was deployed as a practical slaughter in Japan, historical accounts show Einstein spent his final years consumed by immense guilt.
It's tragic. And conversely, you have Werner Heisenberg, the brilliant physicist working for Nazi Germany. Heisenberg actually mapped out the math to build an atomic weapon for the Third Reich.
Wait, really? The namesake for the Breaking Bad character?
Yes, the very same. But recognizing the catastrophic implications of handing that mechanism to Adolf Hitler, Heisenberg intentionally obfuscated his progress.
He sabotaged his own life's work.
He did. He hid the breakthroughs and ensured the Nazi regime never realized how close they were.
That is a monumental act of humanity. He threw away his ultimate scientific achievement because human morality demanded he intervene against the physics.
But those early physicists only held a temporary monopoly.
Right. Knowing that a few scientists once held the fate of the world in their hands, how did this power rapidly proliferate across the globe?
Well, the geopolitics of nuclear proliferation is defined by treaties and, frankly, defiance. Today, the global arsenal sits at roughly 12,500 nuclear weapons.
12,500.
And 90% of those weapons are controlled by just two nations, the United States and Russia.
Leaving the remaining 10% to represent a very exclusive and highly complex club.
Exactly. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, came into force in 1970. Under this international agreement, there are 5 officially recognized nuclear weapon states, defined simply by who had tested a device prior to the treaty's finalization.
Which are the US, Russia, the UK, France, and China.
But the global landscape didn't freeze in 1970. You have the nations that developed arsenals outside the NPT framework.
The rule breakers. India tested a device in 1974, ironically codenamed Smiling Buddha,
which led to Pakistan, driven by severe regional friction with India, establishing its own arsenal in 1998.
And North Korea withdrew from the NPT and currently holds an estimated 40 weapons. Plus, there is Israel, which operates under a strict doctrine of nuclear ambiguity.
Right. They don't explicitly confirm or deny it.
But military analysts estimate they maintain around 100 weapons. But, what military strategists point out is that the threat landscape isn't just defined by who has an active warhead in a silo. We have to consider this bizarre concept of nuclear latency.
Oh, nuclear latency is a fascinating diplomatic and technological gray area. It refers to highly advanced nations like Japan or Germany that possess comprehensive domestic nuclear energy programs.
And immense engineering sectors and a surplus of fissile material.
Exactly. They don't have active weapons, but they essentially have all the parts ready.
Like flat-packed, IKEA-style Doomsday devices. Every single component, from the physics packages to the delivery systems, is fully engineered and waiting.
Yeah, if their regional security situation changed overnight, they wouldn't need to embark on a decades-long Manhattan project. They could assemble and deploy an arsenal in a matter of months.
That potential for rapid proliferation is a massive concern for global security. But, history also provides examples of nations walking away from the brink, right?
It does. South Africa holds a very unique position in this history. During the Cold War, they successfully developed and built 6 functional nuclear weapons.
Wow, I had no idea they actually finished them.
They did. However, in 1989, amidst the end of the Cold War and the impending collapse of the apartheid regime, the president ordered the complete dismantlement of the program.
But it wasn't just a sudden burst of altruism, though. It was a highly calculated strategic move. The ruling government recognized apartheid was falling and wanted to ensure those weapons didn't pass into the hands of the incoming government.
Right. And furthermore, dismantling the weapons was a non-negotiable requirement for South Africa to rejoin the international community and escape crippling global sanctions.
Similarly, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, its massive nuclear arsenal was suddenly distributed across newly independent nations.
Yeah, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine physically held thousands of warheads.
But rather than retaining them to establish themselves as instant superpowers, all 3 nations negotiated the transfer of those weapons back to Russia,
choosing to enter the global stage as non-nuclear states in exchange for security assurances.
Which brings us to the present reality. We've discussed the history and the politics, but what actually makes up that 12,500 weapons stockpile today?
Right, the actual hardware.
Yeah. When we examine the top 5 most powerful nuclear weapons currently in active arsenals, we are looking at a terrifying blend of scale and strategic delivery.
Understanding these specific systems is really essential for grasping modern deterrence doctrines.
So let's run through them. Coming in at number 5 is the American B-83. This weapon is a paradox of miniaturization. It is less than 4 meters long, smaller than a compact car, yet it packs a yield of 1.2 megatons.
Which is 80 times the destructive force of Hiroshima.
80 times. And a single US B-2 stealth bomber can carry 16 of these simultaneously.
But the strategic value of the B-83 isn't just its yield, it's the delivery mechanism. Stealth bombers can penetrate contested airspace, offering flexible targeting that a pre-programmed missile lacks.
And bombers are recallable, right?
Exactly. A head of state can scramble bombers to signal intent during a crisis and call them back at the last second. It gives you options.
Okay, moving to number 4, we have the Trident II, utilized by both the U.S. and the U.K.
Now, this is a submarine-launched ballistic missile with a range of 12,000 kilometers.
Insane.
It can be fired from deep underwater, completely undetected, and it utilizes MIRV technology.
Which stands for Multiple Independently Targetable Reentry Vehicles.
Right. So a single Trident II doesn't carry one bomb. It carries up to 9 independent warheads, each 30 times stronger than Hiroshima. And the U.S. has 14 subs, each carrying 20 of these missiles, constantly prowling the oceans.
Which means the submarine component of the arsenal is the ultimate insurance policy. Because they are virtually impossible to track, they guarantee what strategists call second strike survivability.
Precisely. Even if a nation's entire land-based arsenal is destroyed in a surprise attack, the submarines survive to deliver a world-ending retaliation.
At number 3 is the Chinese DF-5C. This is a massive 183-ton land-based intercontinental ballistic missile. It boasts a 15,000-kilometer range, meaning it can hit anywhere from China.
And like the Trident, it utilizes MIRVs, carrying 12 separate 1-megaton warheads.
Following that, at number 2 is the Russian R-36, designated by NATO as the Satan.
A Cold War-era relic that remains devastatingly effective. It's 33 meters long and carries a payload of up to 20 megatons. A detonation of that magnitude instantly vaporizes everything within a 31-square-kilometer radius.
Okay, wait, let me challenge the logic here.
Sure.
If a single Trident submarine can sit undetected off a coast and destroy entire continents with stealth and impunity, why does Russia or China, with the DF-5C, bother building these massive, non-stealth 183-ton land missiles?
It's a fair question.
I mean, they sit in fixed locations that satellites can clearly see. Isn't that redundant and incredibly vulnerable?
It seems counterintuitive, I agree, but it's a vital component of the nuclear triad, the strategy of maintaining weapons on land, at sea, and in the air.
Okay.
Land-based silos are heavily fortified and incredibly accurate, but their primary strategic value is acting as an absorbent sponge.
A sponge.
Yes, because an adversary knows those silos exist, they must dedicate a massive portion of their own arsenal to destroy them in a first strike. This complicates the enemy's targeting geometry and ensures they can't dedicate all their weapons to targeting cities or submarine bases.
Wow, okay. Which brings us to number 1, the apex of the active arsenal, the Russian RS-28, commonly known as Satan II.
The biggest active threat.
We are looking at a 50-megaton payload. It is the exact same yield as that Earth-cracking Tsar Bomba test from 1961, but it is now mounted on a highly advanced delivery system with an 18,000-kilometer range.
The tactical estimates project it causes complete infrastructure destruction over 2,110 square kilometers.
While the lethal radiation spread covers 11,000 square kilometers.
And this triad of land, sea, and air systems ensures that no single preemptive strike could ever succeed without triggering mutual annihilation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that creates a grand paradox that governs our entire global security apparatus. We have 12,500 weapons capable of erasing ecosystems, blocking out the sun, and vaporizing cities, constantly circling us in the air and under the sea.
Always active.
And yet, not a single one has been used in combat since 1945. The sole defining purpose of a modern nuclear weapon is to ensure that no one else ever uses a nuclear weapon.
It is the architectural mechanism of mutually assured destruction, or man-a-day. The mechanics of man-a-day are best understood not as a game, but as a global Mexican standoff where every participant is holding a dead man switch.
Basically, imagine a sports scoreboard.
Right, like a football game.
Yeah, imagine a football game where both teams have a button that instantly makes the score 100-0 in their favor or instantly gives the opposing team a heart attack.
But because both teams have the button, neither can ever press it, rendering the game completely frozen in a state of mutual terror.
If you and I are in a standoff, and we both have explosives strapped to us with triggers that detonate if our grip relaxes, firing my weapon at you guarantees my own death.
Exactly. If one nation launches a preemptive strike, the incoming missiles are detected by satellites within seconds. Before those first strike missiles even land, the defending nation releases their grip on the dead man's switch, launching their own retaliatory strike.
By the time the first bombs detonate, the second wave is already in the air.
The standoff enforces stability because the only viable strategic move is maintaining the status quo.
And that invisible standoff is the reality you navigate every single day. You go to work, you buy your groceries, you plan for your future entirely under the shadow of this delicate geopolitical architecture.
Largely ignoring the 12,500 Doomsday devices actively suspended above and below you.
We rely entirely on the absolute certainty of mutual terror to keep the world turning.
It requires an unwavering faith in the rationality of every actor involved in the system.
Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over. We discussed how Heisenberg used his human morality to sabotage the math in the 1940s.
Yes, a crucial human intervention.
And we know that in 1961, humanity had to physically sit in a room and choose to dial the Tsar Bomba back by half to avoid cracking the Earth's crust.
Right.
For 80 years, we have relied on the friction of human hesitation. But as we rapidly advance into a new era defined by automated technology, rapid algorithmic decision-making, and artificial intelligence integration into military networks.
The landscape is changing.
Rapidly. The ultimate question isn't whether we can build a bigger bomb. We proved we could do that decades ago. The real question is, will the safeguard of human hesitation, the very moral friction that has kept that dead man switch unpressed since 1945, remain in the loop tomorrow?